Lawrence of Arabia, huge. Went and saw that as a kid, maybe 10 times. The rule now is you're not supposed to do flashbacks, but that whole movie is a flashback. It starts with his death. You know, he's a risk taker going too fast on a country road, and then he tries to avoid somebody, he dies. And then who was Lawrence of Arabia? Okay, let's go back and find out. I like that structure. Visually, it's so sumptuous, and so the vision of the director is so powerful. But it also, in its own way, is a story of corruption and purity. That moment when Lawrence looks at himself drenched in blood and realizes, he confesses to Omar Sharif how much he liked the killing. And he's also a man who is caught between two worlds, I think both between East and West, but also between purity and corruption. So I guess, though when I was a kid, I don't think I thought of it that way. I thought, wow, man, all this action, this is great. And I certainly didn't get the, you know, homoerotic subtext, but there was something very powerful about that. And also in that landscape, sort of human beings in a completely inhospitable landscape. So it was just, it made a big impression on me. Night and Fog, Exterminating Angel by Louis Buñuel, Gimme Shelter by the Maisel brothers, Goodfellas. Yeah. Goodfellas. Those are some just off the top of my head. Also, there's a really odd one, which I think about still a lot, called W.R. Mysteries of an Organism by a Yugoslav filmmaker, then Yugoslav filmmaker, named Dusan Makafiev. And it's a wild movie because it's part drama, part documentary, part kind of essay film. It's all rolled into one. And it's the kind of film that people don't really make anymore. But in the late 60s, early 70s, people were trying to make a lot. And I kind of wish they'd come back. I love film noir. Out of the Past by Jacques Tourneur is one of my favorite movies. I'm also a big fan of The Big Sleep with Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. That's not quite a film noir, but it is, I think, kind of. But it's certainly Out of the Past is. And this notion that you're trapped in a kind of a swamp that's so fetid that, you know, the only way forward really is to be pure of heart, or to try to be pure of heart in some way, shape, or form. And, you know, in its own way, I see Client 9 as a kind of mystery thriller. And there are certain aspects of the film noir that I liked. I told the composer, Pete Nichelle, to try to compose the music as if he were a world-weary pianist in some Upper East Side piano bar, kind of playing out the chords of the Spitzer story. Because it's a kind of an epic story. It's not just about Spitzer, it's about all of us. And that's really what film noir is about too. Film noir is about the id, played out in a kind of a urban jungle setting. And there's a lot about film noir I like a lot. There's also something about fate in film noir. There's the idea that somehow your nature propels you to do things that you just can't help. And that people, are, particularly the femme fatales in film noir, these strong men are drawn to women, and they can't help themselves, even though they have to know it's not good for them. And that obviously is a theme in this film as well. And it's deeply human, but it's almost, from a political perspective, it's almost incomprehensible. He knew how badly his enemies wanted to take him out. And yet he courted danger. You're right, he gave power over to Cece Sewell or to Angelina, or ultimately to Ashley Dupre. I mean, as it turns out, Angelina never, you know, betrayed him publicly until, you know, he was outed. But yeah, it is interesting. And in something like Out of the Past is another interesting formulation for women. I mean, it's you have Jane Greer playing this woman who's very alluring, but ultimately very dark and very evil, and lures you know, Robert Mitchum into a place that ultimately kills him. Whereas you have the good woman, you know, very pretty, stand up straight, but there's something about her that just doesn't work for Robert Mitchum. So it's interesting territory, the film noir. I'm not making you know, a strict analogy here. I'm just saying that's the kind of territory that film noir plays in. And sometimes you have desires that have nothing to do with rational behavior, what you should do. You know, that's, you know, sex is not about what you should do.